I was standing in my parents' beautifully renovated kitchen, admiring the new granite countertops and custom cabinets that had cost me my entire life savings, when my stepbrother Jake walked in with a manila envelope and the kind of smile that meant someone was about to get hurt. "Rebecca, we need to talk," Jake said, setting the envelope on the kitchen island where I'd spent countless hours over the past 6 months coordinating contractors, selecting materials, and managing the complete renovation of our parents' 1970s ranch house. "What's that?" I asked, though something in Jake's expression made my stomach tighten with dread. "The deed to the house. Mom and Dad transferred ownership to me yesterday." The words hit me like a physical blow. I gripped the edge of the granite countertop, the expensive granite I had personally selected and paid for, trying to process what Jake had just said. "What do you mean they transferred ownership to you?" Jake opened the envelope and pulled out legal documents that bore yesterday's date and our parents' signatures. They felt it was time to ensure the family home stayed in responsible hands. I stared at the papers, seeing my parents' names signed next to Jake's, officially transferring the house I had just spent $85,000 renovating into his sole possession. "Jake, I just spent my entire life savings fixing this house. Every penny I had saved over 10 years of teaching, gone, for this house. And it looks great," Jake replied with the casual indifference of someone who had contributed nothing but was now receiving everything. "Mom and Dad really appreciate all your hard work." Hard work. 6 months of my life coordinating every detail of a complete home renovation, depleting my retirement account, liquidating my investments, and taking out a personal loan to transform their aging house into something beautiful and functional. And Jake called it hard work while holding the deed that made him the sole owner. Why didn't anyone tell me they were planning to transfer the house? It just made sense, Rebecca. I'm the son, I'm married with kids, and I have the financial stability to maintain a property like this. The casual sexism and favoritism in Jake's explanation was breathtaking. Despite the fact that I had just proven my financial commitment by funding the entire renovation, our parents had decided that Jake deserved ownership because he was male and married. "Jake, I own a house. I have a successful career. I just demonstrated financial stability by paying for this entire renovation. But you're single, Rebecca. You don't have the same long-term family commitments that I do." I felt rage building in my chest as Jake dismissed my life choices and financial sacrifices with the same casual cruelty our parents had apparently used when deciding to give him the house I had renovated. "Where are Mom and Dad? I need to talk to them about this." "They went to visit Aunt Helen for the week. They thought it would be better to let the dust settle before discussing the details." Of course they had left town. Our parents had waited until I finished the renovation, then transferred the house to Jake, and fled to avoid the confrontation they knew would follow. "Jake, this isn't right. I spent my life savings on this house expecting to inherit my share of it someday." "Rebecca, nobody asked you to spend that money. You chose to renovate the house because you wanted to help Mom and Dad. That was your decision." "I spent the money because they asked me to. Dad specifically said the house needed major updates to remain livable, and Mom said they couldn't afford the renovations on their fixed income. And you generously helped them out. That doesn't create any legal obligation for them to leave you the house." Jake's response revealed the calculated nature of what had happened. Our parents had manipulated me into funding renovations for a house they were planning to give to Jake all along. "Did you know they were planning to transfer the house to you when I was spending my savings on the renovation?" Jake's pause before answering told me everything I needed to know. I knew they were considering their estate planning options. "So you knew they were planning to give you the house while I was spending $85,000 improving it for you?" "Rebecca, I didn't tell them to give me the house. They made that decision independently." "But you didn't tell me about their decision when you saw me emptying my savings account to pay for renovations." "That wasn't my responsibility. You made your own financial choices." I looked around the kitchen I had designed and paid for, with its custom cabinets, granite countertops, stainless steel appliances, and under-cabinet lighting. Every detail had been carefully selected and personally funded by me. The new hardwood floors, updated bathrooms, fresh paint, and landscaping had all come from my life savings. And now Jake owned all of it. "Jake, I need you to understand something. I didn't just help Mom and Dad with renovations. I managed a complete home transformation. I coordinated contractors, selected materials, supervised work, and paid for everything out of my own pocket. And it looks fantastic. You should be proud of what you accomplished." "I should be compensated for what I accomplished." $85,000, Jake. That's not a generous gift. That's a major investment that our parents allowed me to make while planning to give the house to you. "Rebecca, I'm sorry you feel misled, but the house transfer is legal and final. Mom and Dad have the right to distribute their property however they choose. Legal doesn't make it ethical. They manipulated me into funding renovations for a house they were secretly planning to give to their son. Nobody manipulated you. You wanted to help our parents, and you did. That's what family does for each other. Jake's reframing of my financial exploitation as family generosity was stunning in its audacity. He was portraying my $85,000 loss as a charitable gift while pocketing the property I had improved. What happens now? Do I just walk away from the $85,000 I invested in your house? It's not my house, it's the family house. And you're always welcome to visit. Visit the house I renovated with my life savings, which you now own free and clear. Rebecca, I think you're being dramatic about this. You helped our parents when they needed it, and they've secured the family home's future. Everyone benefits. Everyone except me. I had sacrificed my financial security to improve a house that I would never benefit from, while Jake inherited a completely renovated property, without contributing anything. Jake, I want you to buy me out. Pay me the $85,000 I invested in renovations, and I'll consider the matter settled. I don't have $85,000, Rebecca, and honestly, I don't think I should have to pay you for improvements you chose to make voluntarily. Voluntarily? Our parents specifically asked me to fund these renovations. They asked for your help, and you helped. That doesn't create a debt that I'm responsible for. As Jake gathered up the deed papers and prepared to leave the kitchen I had designed and paid for, I realized that I was facing a level of family betrayal I had never imagined possible. My parents had manipulated me into funding $85,000 worth of home improvements, then given the enhanced property to Jake, while I received nothing but the debt from my depleted savings. Jake had apparently known about their plan throughout my renovation project, but had never warned me that I was improving a house I would never inherit. And now both Jake and our parents expected me to accept this arrangement as normal family dynamics, rather than the calculated theft it actually represented. But they had made one crucial mistake in their assessment of my character and capabilities. They assumed that because I was generous and family-oriented, I would accept being exploited without fighting back. They were wrong, and they were about to discover just how wrong they were. 2 days after Jake's devastating revelation about the house deed, I was sitting in my own kitchen surrounded by 6 months' worth of receipts, contracts, and documentation that would soon destroy my family's assumption that I would quietly accept being defrauded out of $85,000. The scope of evidence I had inadvertently collected was staggering. Every contractor payment, every material purchase, every permit fee, and every design consultation had been meticulously documented because I'm a teacher who believes in keeping detailed records of major financial transactions. What I had was more than just proof of my investment. I had evidence of systematic fraud. Rebecca, I can't believe what your family did to you, said my best friend Sarah, who was helping me organize the documentation. This isn't just unfair. It's criminal. What do you mean criminal? Look at these text messages from your parents, Sarah said, showing me my phone. They specifically asked you to fund renovations for the family home and promised that everyone would benefit from the improvements. I reread the messages I'd received from Mom and Dad over the past 6 months. Rebecca, the house really needs updating to remain safe and comfortable. Could you help us with renovations? We can't afford major improvements on our fixed income. We're so grateful for your investment in the family home. This will benefit everyone for years to come. Your generosity is ensuring that the house stays in the family for future generations. Sarah, they weren't lying about the house staying in the family. It's staying with Jake. But they deliberately misled you about who would benefit from your investment. Rebecca, that's fraud. Obtaining money under false pretenses. Sarah was a paralegal at a law firm that specialized in family financial disputes, and her analysis of my situation was becoming increasingly legal rather than emotional. What exactly constitutes fraud in a situation like this? When someone induces you to give them money by making false or misleading statements about how that money will be used or who will benefit from it. Sarah showed me the legal definition she'd looked up. Fraud requires proof that false representations were made with intent to deceive, that the victim relied on those representations, and that the victim suffered damages as a result. So, my parents asking me to invest in the family home while secretly planning to give it to Jake could constitute fraud, especially if they knew about the planned transfer when they were asking you for money. Rebecca, do you have any evidence about when they decided to give Jake the house? I thought about Jake's suspicious knowledge of our parents' estate planning options and pulled out my laptop to review family email chains and text messages from the past year. What I found was devastating. In March, 2 months before our parents had asked me to fund renovations, Jake had sent Dad an email about property tax implications of the house transfer we discussed. The email included references to timing the deed transfer and maximizing the property value before ownership change. Sarah, look at this. Jake and Dad were discussing transferring the house to Jake in March. The renovation request didn't start until May. So your parents knew they were giving Jake the house when they asked you to pay for improvements? It looks that way. And there's more. I found a text thread between Mom and Jake from June, right in the middle of my renovation project. Mom, Rebecca is doing such beautiful work on the house. You're going to love the new kitchen. Jake, can't wait to start using it. The granite countertops were a great choice. Mom, she has such good taste. You're inheriting a completely updated home. Jake, I know. Best $85,000 I never had to spend. The casual cruelty of that exchange was breathtaking. While I was depleting my life savings to renovate what I thought was the family home, Jake and Mom were joking about how much money he was saving by letting me fund improvements to his future property. Rebecca, this is smoking gun evidence. Your family orchestrated a scheme to trick you into funding renovations for Jake's benefit. What are my legal options? You could sue for fraud, seeking return of your $85,000 plus damages. You could also file a lien against the property, claiming compensation for improvements you made. Would those approaches actually work? With this evidence? Absolutely. You have written proof that your parents misled you about who would benefit from your investment, and you have documentation showing they planned the deception months in advance. As Sarah and I continued reviewing my documentation, we discovered additional evidence of the systematic nature of my family's fraud. Every contractor I had hired had been told that I was updating the family home. The permits had been filed under my name as the property investor. Even the insurance adjustments had listed me as the homeowner representative, managing renovations. My parents had allowed me to take legal and financial responsibility for the renovation project, while secretly planning to transfer ownership to Jake once the work was complete. Sarah, there's something else I need to show you. I pulled out the folder containing my parents' original house assessment and renovation estimates. Look at this appraisal from last year. The house was valued at $180,000 in its original condition. And what's it worth now after your renovations? The contractor estimated the improvements added $95,000 to $110,000 in value. So the house is now worth about $280,000 to $290,000, which means Jake didn't just receive a free house. He received a house you personally increased in value by over $100,000. The full scope of the theft was becoming clear. I had taken an aging, dated house worth $180,000 and transformed it into a modern, updated property worth nearly $300,000. Jake had received not just a free house, but a free house that I had made significantly more valuable. Rebecca, I think you need to consult with an attorney who specializes in family financial fraud. Do you think I have a strong case? I think you have an overwhelming case. Your family committed documented fraud to steal $85,000 from you while increasing Jake's inheritance by over $100,000. That evening, I called my parents' house, knowing they had returned from their convenient trip to Aunt Helen's. Hi, Mom. We need to talk about the house situation. Rebecca, honey, I hope you understand that Dad and I had to make difficult decisions about our estate planning. Mom, I found the text messages between you and Jake from June. The ones where you joked about him inheriting a completely updated home and how it was the best $85,000 he never had to spend. The silence on the phone was deafening. I also found Dad's emails with Jake from March, discussing the timing of the deed transfer to maximize property value. Rebecca, you can explain why you asked me to invest $85,000 in the family home while secretly planning to give it to Jake? You can explain why you let me take financial and legal responsibility for renovations on a house you knew I would never inherit? We thought you would want to help the family. By being defrauded out of my life savings? Mom, you and Dad committed fraud. You obtained money from me under false pretenses, and I have documentation proving it. Fraud? Rebecca, that's a very serious accusation. It's also an accurate one. I have emails, text messages, and contractor communications that prove you planned this deception months in advance. What do you want from us? I want Jake to compensate me for the $85,000 I invested in his house, or I want the house deed transferred to reflect my investment in the property. Rebecca, we can't just undo the transfer. There are legal complications. Then you'll face legal complications from the lawsuit I'm filing for fraud, conversion, and unjust enrichment. You're going to sue your own family? I'm going to sue the people who defrauded me out of my life savings. The fact that they're related to me makes it worse, not better. After hanging up, I felt the cold satisfaction of someone who had just demonstrated that their exploitation had been thoroughly documented and would have serious consequences. My family had assumed that I would quietly accept being cheated because maintaining family harmony was more important to me than financial justice. They had underestimated my principles, my documentation habits, and my willingness to fight back when family members chose to commit crimes against me. Jake thought he had received a free house. Instead, he had received a house that would cost him exactly as much as I had invested in it, plus legal fees and damages. My parents thought they had cleverly manipulated me into funding Jake's inheritance. Instead, they had created a paper trail that would make them defendants in a fraud lawsuit. They were all about to discover that stealing $85,000 from a family member has consequences that extend far beyond the money itself. 1 week after confronting my parents about their fraud, I was sitting in the office of Margaret Chen, a family law attorney who specialized in cases involving financial exploitation among relatives. The evidence spread across her conference table painted a picture of systematic deception that even she found remarkable. "Rebecca, in 25 years of family law practice, I've rarely seen such clear-cut evidence of fraudulent inducement," Margaret said, reviewing the timeline of text messages, emails, and contractor documents I'd provided. "Your family essentially conducted a months-long con game to trick you into funding renovations for property they knew you'd never inherit. What are my chances of recovering the money I invested?" "Excellent. We have multiple causes of action: fraud, conversion, unjust enrichment, and constructive trust. Your family took $85,000 from you under false pretenses while secretly planning to give the improved property to your stepbrother." Margaret showed me the legal complaint she'd prepared, which sought not just return of my $85,000 investment, but additional damages for the calculated nature of the deception. "We're asking for $85,000 in direct damages representing your renovation investment, plus $25,000 in consequential damages for depleting your retirement savings, plus attorney's fees and costs." "What about the increased property value?" "I didn't just spend money on the house. I increased its worth by over $100,000. That's covered under our unjust enrichment claim. Jake received property improvements worth approximately $110,000 that he didn't pay for. He'll be required to compensate you for that benefit. So we're seeking over $200,000 total? We're seeking full compensation for the theft your family committed against you, plus damages that reflect the premeditated nature of their fraud." Margaret explained the legal strategy we would use to attack my family's theft from multiple angles. "First, we'll establish that your parents made material misrepresentations when they asked you to invest in the family home, while secretly planning to transfer ownership to Jake. What constitutes material misrepresentation? They told you the renovations would benefit everyone, and that your investment was securing the house for future generations. Meanwhile, they were planning to give the property exclusively to Jake. Second, we'll prove that you relied on their misrepresentations when making your $85,000 investment. You have text messages showing you asked specifically about how the renovations would affect the family's long-term use of the property. Margaret showed me messages where I had asked Mom about estate planning implications of my renovation investment, and her responses assuring me that my contributions would benefit everyone who inherits the property. Third, we'll demonstrate that your reliance was reasonable. Most people would assume that investing $85,000 in renovations would create some ownership interest or inheritance expectation. Finally, we'll show the damages you suffered, not just the $85,000 in direct losses, but the depletion of your retirement savings and the emotional distress of being betrayed by your own family. The legal framework was comprehensive and devastating. My family hadn't just hurt my feelings. They had committed actionable fraud that would result in significant financial consequences. What about Jake's claim that he didn't know about the renovations when our parents decided to give him the house? Margaret pulled out the email evidence showing Jake's involvement in planning the property transfer months before the renovations began. Jake's emails prove he was discussing the house transfer with your father in March, 2 months before your parents asked you to fund renovations. He's been part of this scheme from the beginning. What are my family's likely defenses? They'll probably claim that your renovation investment was a gift, and that you had no reasonable expectation of compensation or ownership interest. How do we counter that defense? With the evidence showing they specifically induced your investment by misrepresenting who would benefit from it. Gift givers don't typically spend months planning how to trick recipients into giving them money. Margaret's confidence about our legal position was reassuring, but I was more interested in the practical implications of the lawsuit. What happens when we file the complaint? Your family will be served with legal papers requiring them to respond within 30 days. They'll likely hire attorneys and try to negotiate a settlement rather than face trial. What if they refuse to settle? Then we go to trial with overwhelming evidence of fraud and seek maximum damages, including punitive awards for the calculated nature of their deception. 3 days later, Margaret filed the lawsuit in county court, and process servers delivered legal papers to my parents' house and Jake's workplace. The complaint was comprehensive and damaging, laying out the entire timeline of my family's deception with supporting documentation. Jake called me within hours of being served, his voice shaking with anger and panic. "Rebecca, what the hell is this lawsuit? You're actually suing your own family?" "I'm suing the people who defrauded me out of $85,000. The fact that they're related to me makes their theft worse, not better. We didn't steal anything from you. Mom and Dad gave me the house and you chose to renovate it." "Jake, I have your text messages joking about inheriting a house you never had to pay to improve. I have emails showing you planned the property transfer months before I was asked to fund renovations. That doesn't prove anything illegal. It proves you all conspired to trick me into funding renovations for your benefit while lying about who would inherit the improved property. Rebecca, this lawsuit is going to destroy our family. The family was destroyed when you decided to steal my life savings. The lawsuit is just documenting what you already did. What do you want? What will it take to make this go away?" I felt the cold satisfaction of someone whose legal strategy was already working. Jake was panicking because he realized the evidence against him was overwhelming. "I want the $85,000 I invested in your house, plus compensation for the property value I added, plus damages for the fraud you committed. I don't have that kind of money. Then you'll need to sell the house I renovated and pay me what you owe me. You want me to sell the family home? I want you to compensate me for the theft you committed. How you raise the money is your problem." Mom called the next day, crying and begging me to drop the lawsuit. "Rebecca, please, this is tearing our family apart. Can't we work something out privately? We could have worked something out privately before you defrauded me. Now we're working it out through the legal system. But the lawsuit makes us look like criminals. Because you are criminals. You committed fraud, Mom. You stole $85,000 from your own daughter. We never meant to hurt you. You planned this deception for months. You coordinated with Jake to trick me into funding renovations for his benefit. That's not accidental hurt, that's calculated theft. What if we paid you back some of the money?" "Some of the money? Mom, you stole all of my life savings. I want all of it back, plus damages for your fraud. We don't have $85,000 to give you. Then you shouldn't have stolen $85,000 from me." 2 weeks after filing the lawsuit, Margaret called with news that my family's attorneys wanted to discuss settlement terms. "Rebecca, they're ready to negotiate. Their lawyers reviewed our evidence and advised them that fighting this case would be expensive and futile. What are they offering? Full return of your $85,000 investment, plus $15,000 in damages, paid over 18 months. What about the increased property value I created? They're claiming that's covered by returning your actual expenditures. That's not acceptable. I didn't just spend money on the house, I increased its value by over $100,000. Jake shouldn't get to keep that benefit for free." "I agree. We're countering with a demand for $85,000 in direct restitution, $50,000 for unjust enrichment representing half the property value increase you created, and $25,000 in damages for the fraud. So $160,000 total, which represents fair compensation for the theft they committed and the value you added to Jake's inheritance." As negotiations continued, I felt the satisfaction of someone who had transformed victimization into victory through superior preparation and legal strategy. My family had assumed I would quietly accept being defrauded because fighting back would be difficult for family relationships. Instead, I had documented their crimes, hired competent legal representation, and forced them to face serious financial consequences for their theft. Jake thought he had received a free house. Now he was facing the possibility of losing that house to pay for the fraud he'd committed to get it. My parents thought they had cleverly manipulated me into funding Jake's inheritance. Now they were defendants in a lawsuit that would cost them far more than the money they'd stolen. They were all about to learn that family relationships don't provide immunity from the consequences of criminal behavior. 3 months after filing the lawsuit that had destroyed my family's assumption that theft within families goes unpunished, I was sitting in Margaret Chen's office reviewing the final settlement agreement that would restore my financial security while ensuring my family faced appropriate consequences for their fraud. "Rebecca, they've accepted our terms," Margaret announced, sliding the signed settlement documents across her desk. "Full restitution of $85,000, plus $50,000 for unjust enrichment, plus $25,000 in fraud damages. Total payment of $160,000 over 24 months. I felt the deep satisfaction of someone whose legal strategy had completely succeeded. Not only was I recovering my stolen life savings, but I was receiving additional compensation that reflected the calculated nature of my family's deception. How are they planning to pay $160,000? Jake is refinancing the house you renovated and taking out a home equity loan. Essentially, he's borrowing against the property value you created to compensate you for creating it. The irony was perfect. Jake would spend the next 2 years making loan payments for the privilege of keeping the house I had improved, while I received the compensation he should have paid me in the first place. What about my parents' involvement? They're jointly liable for the fraud damages. If Jake defaults on any payments, you can pursue collection against your parents' assets. So they're all financially responsible for the theft they committed? Completely. The settlement agreement includes detailed admissions of wrongdoing that prevent them from ever claiming your renovation investment was a voluntary gift. Margaret showed me the admissions section of the settlement, where my family acknowledged that they had made material misrepresentations regarding property ownership and inheritance expectations, and that they had induced plaintiff's investment through false statements about who would benefit from property improvements. These admissions are legally binding? Absolutely. If your family ever tries to rewrite history or claim they didn't defraud you, these signed admissions can be used against them in any future legal proceedings. The settlement also included provisions that went beyond financial compensation. Jake was required to acknowledge in writing that I had solely funded and managed all renovations to the property, and that he had received property improvements valued at approximately $110,000 without compensation to the party who created that value. Margaret, what happens if they try to violate the settlement terms? Immediate acceleration of all remaining payments plus additional penalties. If Jake misses even one payment, the entire $160,000 becomes due immediately. And if he can't pay, forced sale of the house with proceeds going to satisfy your judgment. The legal protections were comprehensive and ensured that my family couldn't escape the consequences of their theft through delay tactics or financial manipulation. 2 days after the settlement was finalized, Jake called me with barely controlled anger in his voice. "Rebecca, I hope you're satisfied. You've gotten your money, and you've destroyed our family relationships in the process. I recovered the money you stole from me, Jake. The family relationships were destroyed when you decided to commit fraud." "It wasn't fraud. Mom and Dad had the right to give their house to whoever they wanted. They had the right to give away their own property. They didn't have the right to trick me into spending $85,000 improving property they were secretly giving to you. You chose to renovate the house, based on lies you all told me about who would benefit from my investment. Jake, you signed a settlement agreement admitting that you made material misrepresentations. Don't pretend it wasn't fraud now. The legal system forced me to sign that settlement. The legal system held you accountable for theft. You could have chosen honesty instead of fraud, but you chose fraud and now you're paying the consequences. $160,000 in consequences for inheriting a house. $160,000 in consequences for stealing $85,000 from me and trying to keep $110,000 in property improvements I created. You're lucky the settlement didn't include punitive damages. Jake's call revealed that he still didn't understand the severity of what he'd done or why his actions had earned such serious consequences. The following week, I received my first settlement payment of $8,000, representing the beginning of Jake's 24-month compensation schedule. The money felt different from regular income. It carried the weight of justice served and family betrayal appropriately punished. "How does it feel to have your savings restored?" asked my friend Sarah during our regular coffee meeting. "Satisfying, but not in the way I expected. It's not really about the money anymore. It's about proving that family members can't commit crimes against each other without consequences." Do you think Jake and your parents learned anything from this experience? I think they learned that I'm not someone who quietly accepts being victimized. Whether they learned anything about ethics or treating family members honestly is less clear. 6 months into the settlement payment schedule, I received an unexpected call from my father. "Rebecca, I wanted to apologize for what we did to you." The apology was the first acknowledgement from either parent that they had actually wronged me rather than just made difficult estate planning decisions. "I appreciate the apology, Dad. We never should have asked you to spend your savings on the house while planning to give it to Jake. That was wrong, and we're sorry." "What made you realize it was wrong?" "Having to explain to our attorney exactly what we'd done to you. When we laid out the timeline of asking for your money while planning Jake's inheritance, even our own lawyer was appalled." "So you understood you were committing fraud?" "We understood we'd betrayed your trust in a way that was legally actionable and morally inexcusable." Dad's admission was more honest than anything I'd heard from my family since discovering their deception. "Dad, why did you decide to give Jake the house instead of splitting it between us?" "Because Jake has children, and we thought he needed the stability more than you did. But I'm the one who demonstrated financial stability by funding the renovations. Jake never contributed anything to the house." "I know. We made decisions based on outdated assumptions about family roles rather than actual contributions and capabilities." "Would you make the same decisions again?" "No. If we could do it over, we would either split the house ownership to reflect your investment, or we would have been honest about our intentions before asking you to spend your money. Dad's perspective had clearly evolved through the legal process, but I wondered if the same was true for Mom and Jake. 1 year after the settlement began, Jake made his final payment, officially completing his compensation for the fraud he'd committed. The total amount, $160,000, represented not just recovery of my stolen savings, but acknowledgement that family theft has serious financial consequences. "Rebecca, I've made the last payment," Jake said during a brief phone call. "I hope we can start rebuilding our relationship now. That depends on whether you understand why what you did was wrong." "I understand that you felt wronged. Jake, do you understand that you committed fraud? That you stole from me?" "I understand that the legal system said I committed fraud." His answer revealed that Jake still viewed his theft as a legal technicality, rather than actual wrongdoing. "Until you can acknowledge that you actually stole from me, not that lawyers said you stole from me, we don't have a foundation for rebuilding any relationship." "Rebecca, I don't want to keep fighting about this." "Then don't. But don't expect me to pretend that what you did was acceptable just because you finished paying for it." As Jake hung up, I realized that the financial justice I'd achieved was complete, but the family reconciliation would require acknowledgement of wrongdoing that Jake still wasn't capable of providing. 2 weeks later, I received a call that demonstrated how completely my family's dynamics had shifted. "Rebecca, this is your Aunt Helen. I wanted you to know that your parents told me what happened with the house renovations and the lawsuit." Aunt Helen was Dad's sister and had always been the family member who spoke truth regardless of social comfort. "What did they tell you?" "That they tricked you into spending your life savings on improvements to a house they were planning to give to Jake, and that you had to sue them to get your money back." "That's accurate." "Rebecca, I want you to know that what they did was unconscionable. I've told your father that their behavior was theft, pure and simple." "How did he respond?" "He agreed with me. Your parents know they committed a serious wrong against you, even if Jake still doesn't understand it." "I appreciate you saying that, Aunt Helen. I also want you to know that several family members are disgusted by what Jake did. Taking advantage of your generosity while knowing he was inheriting the house you were improving, that's not the behavior of someone with character." Aunt Helen's perspective confirmed that the family's assessment of the situation had shifted dramatically through the legal process. I was no longer seen as the difficult daughter who sued her own family, but as the victim of fraud who had appropriately demanded justice. "Aunt Helen, do you think this will affect family gatherings going forward?" "Honestly, I think it should. Jake's behavior revealed something ugly about his character, and your parents' behavior revealed poor judgment that had serious consequences for you. So you think family relationships will be permanently changed?" "I think family relationships should be based on honesty and mutual respect. Jake demonstrated that he's willing to steal from family members, and your parents demonstrated that they're willing to enable that theft. Those are facts that can't be ignored." As my conversation with Aunt Helen ended, I realized that the lawsuit had accomplished more than financial recovery. It had forced the entire family to confront the reality of what Jake and my parents had done to me. The family members with integrity were disgusted by the theft and supported my legal response. The family members without integrity were still making excuses and trying to minimize their wrongdoing. But most importantly, everyone now understood that I was not someone who would quietly accept being victimized, regardless of family relationships. 3 months later, I used part of my settlement money to make a down payment on a beautiful house in a better neighborhood than the one where my parents lived. The house was smaller than the one I had renovated for Jake, but it was mine, and no one could take it away from me through deception and theft. "Rebecca, your new house is gorgeous," Sarah said during her first visit. "How does it feel to own property that no one can steal from you?" "It feels like freedom, financial freedom, emotional freedom, and freedom from family members who think blood relationships provide immunity for criminal behavior." "Do you regret suing your family?" "I regret that they forced me to sue them by committing fraud, but I don't regret holding them accountable for their theft." "What would you tell other people who are being financially exploited by family members?" "That family relationships don't excuse criminal behavior, and that accepting theft to preserve family harmony just enables more theft. And that documentation is crucial?" "Absolutely. If I hadn't kept detailed records of the renovation process and my family's communications, I never could have proven their fraud." As I settled into my new home, purchased with money that Jake had been forced to pay me for his theft, I felt the satisfaction of someone who had transformed victimization into empowerment through strategic legal action. My family had assumed that I would quietly accept being defrauded because family loyalty was more important to me than financial justice. Instead, I had demonstrated that family members who commit crimes against each other face the same legal consequences as strangers who commit the same crimes. Jake had learned that stealing $85,000 from a family member would cost him $160,000 in legal consequences. My parents had learned that enabling fraud makes them liable for the damages caused by that fraud. And I had learned that my principles were stronger than my desire for family harmony, and that fighting for justice was more important than maintaining relationships with people who were willing to steal from me. The settlement was complete, but the lesson would last forever. Family members who choose theft over honesty will face consequences that extend far beyond the money they steal. 2 years after receiving my final settlement payment from Jake, I was hosting a housewarming party in the beautiful home I'd purchased with money that represented both justice served and lessons learned about family, trust, and the importance of holding people accountable for their choices. "Rebecca, your house is absolutely stunning," said my colleague Maria as she admired the open floor plan and carefully selected furnishings that reflected my personal taste rather than family expectations. "Everything about it feels like you." "Thank you. It's the first home I've owned that truly belongs to me. No family strings attached, no hidden agendas, no one who can take it away through deception." The house represented more than just a place to live. It symbolized the financial independence and emotional autonomy I'd gained by refusing to accept family theft as normal relationship dynamics. "How does it feel to be completely free from the family drama?" asked my friend Sarah, who had supported me throughout the legal battle that had transformed my life. "It feels like I finally understand the difference between family loyalty and family exploitation. Real loyalty doesn't require accepting criminal behavior." "Do you ever regret how things ended with Jake and your parents?" "I regret that they forced the situation to end this way by choosing theft over honesty. But I don't regret holding them accountable for their choices." The housewarming party was attended by friends, colleagues, and the few family members who had supported my legal response to Jake's fraud. Notably absent were Jake, my parents, and the relatives who had suggested that I should have kept family business private instead of pursuing justice through the courts. "Rebecca, I want you to meet someone," said Aunt Helen, approaching with a woman I didn't recognize. "This is Janet Morrison. Her daughter is facing a similar situation with family financial exploitation." Janet looked exhausted and defeated in the way that people do when they're being victimized by family members, but don't know how to fight back. "Helen told me about your lawsuit against your family," Janet said. "I'm dealing with something similar with my son and his wife. They convinced me to co-sign a mortgage for them, then defaulted on payments and destroyed my credit. Are you considering legal action? Everyone tells me I shouldn't sue family members, that it would destroy our relationships." I guided Janet to a quiet corner where we could talk privately about her situation and the choices she was facing. "Janet, can I ask you something? If a stranger had convinced you to co-sign a loan, then defaulted and destroyed your credit, would you sue them?" "Of course. So why should your son and daughter-in-law be exempt from consequences for doing the same thing?" "Because they're family. Family members who exploit your trust and destroy your financial security." "Janet, blood relationships don't provide immunity for criminal behavior." I shared my experience with family financial fraud, the evidence I'd gathered, and the legal process that had resulted in full compensation for my losses. "The key is documentation," I explained. "Every communication, every financial transaction, every promise they made about how your money would be used or protected. I kept some records, but I wasn't as thorough as you were. That's okay. The important thing is to start documenting everything from this point forward, and to consult with an attorney who can evaluate your legal options." "But what about family relationships?" "Janet, what kind of family relationships are you actually preserving? Ones where your son and daughter-in-law can exploit your generosity without consequences? That's not a healthy family dynamic. That's an abusive one." 6 months later, Janet called to tell me that she had filed a lawsuit against her son and daughter-in-law for fraudulent inducement and was likely to recover most of her financial losses. "Rebecca, I can't thank you enough for encouraging me to fight back. I was so worried about destroying family relationships that I was willing to accept financial ruin. How do you feel about pursuing legal action?" "Empowered. For the first time in months, I feel like I have some control over my situation, instead of just being a victim." "What about your son's reaction?" "He's furious and claims I'm destroying the family." "But Rebecca, I realized that he destroyed the family when he chose to exploit me. I'm just refusing to pretend it didn't happen." Janet's experience confirmed what I'd learned through my own legal battle. Family members who commit financial crimes count on their victims' reluctance to pursue justice because of relationship concerns. But justice delayed is justice denied, and family exploitation often escalates when it goes unpunished. 3 years after my settlement was completed, I received an unexpected call from Jake. "Rebecca, I need to apologize to you." The words were surprising because Jake had never acknowledged wrongdoing throughout our legal battle or settlement process. What prompted this apology? "My marriage is falling apart, and my wife's attorney is reviewing our financial history as part of the divorce proceedings. She discovered the settlement payments I made to you and wanted to understand why I owed you $160,000. What did you tell her? I had to explain the whole situation, how we tricked you into renovating a house we were giving to me, how you sued us for fraud, how I had to refinance the house to pay you back. And how did she react? She was horrified. She said what we did to you was unconscionable, and that she never realized I was capable of that kind of deception. Jake's voice carried genuine remorse for the first time since the original theft had been discovered. Rebecca, I think my wife is divorcing me partly because of what I did to you. She says it revealed something about my character that she can't accept. What do you think it revealed? That I was willing to steal from my own family when it benefited me. That I was willing to watch you spend your life savings while knowing you'd never benefit from it. Finally, Jake was acknowledging the actual nature of his actions rather than dismissing them as legal technicalities or family misunderstandings. Do you understand now why I sued you? Yes, you were right to sue us. What we did was theft, and you had every right to demand justice. Why did it take you 3 years to realize that? Because I was focused on justifying my actions instead of examining them honestly. It took my wife's reaction to make me see the situation from your perspective. Jake, I appreciate the apology. It means something to hear you acknowledge what actually happened. Rebecca, is there any chance we could rebuild some kind of relationship? I considered his question carefully. Jake had finally accepted responsibility for his theft, but 3 years of justification and excuse-making had revealed fundamental character issues that an apology couldn't immediately resolve. I'm willing to have occasional contact, but rebuilding trust would require consistent demonstration that you've actually changed, not just that you've realized you were wrong. I understand. I don't deserve immediate forgiveness. It's not about deserving forgiveness. It's about proving that you're no longer someone who would exploit family members for personal gain. 4 years after the original theft, I was invited to speak at a conference for family law attorneys about financial exploitation among relatives. My presentation focused on the importance of thorough documentation and the effectiveness of civil litigation in cases involving family fraud. The key insight from my experience, I told the assembled attorneys, is that family relationships don't eliminate the need for accountability. If anything, exploitation by family members is more harmful because it violates trust that's built over decades. What advice would you give to victims of family financial crimes? Asked one attorney in the audience. Document everything. Seek competent legal representation, and don't let family loyalty prevent you from pursuing justice. Accepting theft to preserve relationships just enables more theft. Do you think civil litigation is always the best response to family financial exploitation? I think civil litigation is often the only effective response. Family members who are willing to commit financial crimes rarely respond to moral appeals or family pressure. They respond to legal consequences. After my presentation, several attorneys approached me with similar cases they were handling, confirming that family financial exploitation was much more common than most people realized. Your case has become something of a legend in family law circles, one attorney told me. The thoroughness of your documentation and the size of your settlement have encouraged other victims to pursue justice instead of accepting exploitation. 5 years after recovering my stolen savings, I was financially secure, emotionally healthy, and surrounded by relationships based on mutual respect rather than exploitation or manipulation. The house I'd bought with settlement money had appreciated significantly in value. My career as a teacher continued to flourish, and I'd built a social circle of people who valued honesty and accountability. Most importantly, I had learned that my principles were strong enough to withstand family pressure, and that fighting for justice was more important than maintaining relationships with people who were willing to commit crimes against me. Jake still lived in the house I had renovated, but he now understood the true cost of that house. Not just the mortgage payments he continued making, but the family relationships he had damaged through his theft, and the personal integrity he had compromised through his choices. My parents had learned that enabling theft makes them liable for the consequences of that theft, and that family loyalty requires honesty rather than just silence about wrongdoing. And I had learned that some battles are worth fighting, even when, especially when, they're against people who share your DNA. The foundation I'd built for my new life was stronger than any family relationship based on exploitation or acceptance of criminal behavior. It was a foundation built on justice, accountability, and the understanding that respect must be earned through actions, not demanded through blood relationships. That foundation would last a lifetime because it was built on principles that couldn't be stolen, manipulated, or taken away by people who confused family loyalty with criminal immunity.